beautiful introduction, and thank you, Mafrida and Doris, for inviting me to be part of this momentous moment. Before I start this first panel on demystifying the roadblocks and the risks, the perceived notions, I would like to ask all of you to just trust me enough to just quickly close your eyes. I want you to close your eyes and just think for a second, why are you really here today? Why are you in this room? Why are you in Davos? And why are you joining a conversation on the perceived bottlenecks and on rewriting the African narrative? I would like to ask my panelists to really think of the position they hold, the privilege that they carry, and the opportunity they have now in representing the opportunities that are on the continent. I ask now my valued speakers, Tariq Ahmed from the African Commission, to join me on stage. I would like to ask Continental Kenfak Moafi, the founder of 3Es for Africa, to join me on stage. Izzy Obeng, the founder of Foundervine, to come to the front, and Scarlett Vanovich. I am very much aware that we only have 28 minutes left, so I don't want to lose too much time talking about why there is an opportunity on the continent. But what I want to keep in mind is that, as the great Kwame Nkrumah said in 1957, as Africans, we don't look east, we don't look west, we face ahead. And there's so much conversation of the east versus the west all across the halls of Davos this week. But what we have to keep in mind is that Africa needs to face forward. So with that in mind, I ask Tariq to please start by introducing yourself, talk about your role, and then we continue with Kontimi, Izzy, and Scarlett. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And thank you, Mafrida and Doris, for inviting the African Union Commission, inviting me to this very timely event and this very excellent and bold initiative, connecting countries, continents, unlocking Africa's growth together. My name is Tariq Ahmed. I'm a senior economist in the African Union Commission, a senior policy officer, working on trade, inclusive markets, and inclusive business.
Thank you very much. Continue.
Yes. Thank you very much, Kalula. And thanks, of course, to Mafrida and the team for the invitation. My name is Continental Kenfak. I am a renewables energy engineer, Cameroonian, based in Germany. And I work at an organization called Readiness for Africa. We work with young people on the ground, students, researchers, and entrepreneurs, and we help them to create innovative solutions to the climate crisis. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Izzy Obeng. I run a company called Foundervine, and Foundervine has been working for a decade now supporting founders who are at the earlier stages of their businesses, accessing the support that they need to grow successful businesses and raise capital. So what we do is connect government, we connect the private sector to these organizations, and we work collaboratively with them to make impact in the startup space.
Hi everyone, I'm Scarlett Vanovich. I'm the head of collective action at the Basel Institute of Governance, and I work globally on connecting the dots between business, government, and civil society to strengthen business integrity and foster sustainable growth. And I'm really excited to be here and share some of those sort of rewriting of narrative attempts, because I think it's an incredibly important thing to do in this day and age where we hear every day in the news about all the terrible things that are happening. And I think sometimes we miss the opportunities to share all of the incredible leadership that is out there. And so I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you very much. Please give a round of applause for the panelists. So we'll start with trade and policy. Tariq, from your policy and trade perspective, which political or economic constraints are most often perceived as barriers? And where do you, in your daily work, see progress that is meaningful, but not yet sufficiently exercised?
Thank you very much, moderator, for this good question. And at the outset, let me introduce what is the African Union Commission, because I see a very dynamic audience here from investors, businessmen, and policymakers. The African Union Commission was originally the Organization of African Unity. It was established in 1963. And at that time, two main institutions were established. It was the African Development Bank and the Organization of African Unity. In 2013, the African Union Commission established what is called Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And the Africa we want is a transformative strategic framework for the African continent. And it has 7 aspirations. The first aspiration of Agenda 2063 is to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth in Africa. Africa is known to be at the bottom of the value chain with a very weak manufacturing base. This is due to many reasons I will not discuss, but what the agenda seeks to achieve is value addition in Africa. It seeks to strengthen value chains. It seeks to integrate Africa through intra-African trade. And within these objectives of the African Union, we have projects, we have strategic frameworks, we have flagship projects. And in the African Union Commission Economic Trade Tourism Department, we have the African Commodity Strategy, which is aimed at increasing value addition in African production. We have the African Mining Vision, and we have the flagship project that most of you know called the African Continental Free Trade Area. And all of these aim at achieving, integrating, and creating inclusive growth and inclusive markets in Africa. Let me give you some statistics. Intra-African trade is only between 14 to 17% compared to intra-European trade, which is over 65%. Illicit financial flows are around 80 to 90 billion annually lost. The informal sector, according to the African Development Bank, is 80% in sub-Saharan Africa, employing mostly young people. And through the agenda of the African Union and through the policies, we seek to advancing these bottlenecks that we are facing. We have a lot of opportunities now. We have the African Continental Free Trade Area, and it is moving well. We are working on implementation. We are working on awareness building with the member states of the African Union. And the implementation has 2 tracks. The first track is technical, and this involves the legal instruments that the member states need to adopt for the free movement and the different protocols. And there's the political commitments. And this we're working on awareness building reports on the benefits of integrating Africa. So we need to bridge, we need this multiplier effect, and this will be done through implementing the Agenda 2063 through the flagship projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tariq. Before I hand over to Continue, I would like to get a sense of the room. Who in here has visited the African continent? Yes. Oh, that's true. Okay. So, who in here employs African talent that lives on the continent? Good. Okay. There's room for more. Adair, one of the sponsors, get in touch with them if you need software developers who help you on your tech, AI, and whatnot. But another person who you need to meet is Continue. Continue lives on the diaspora, and he works with youth on education, with talent on ecology, and more. Continue, please tell us, in climate and technology-driven innovation, where do you see Africa's capacity most underestimated, and what conditions are helping young innovators turn ideas into viable solutions?
Thank you very much, Tajula. I think that based on my work, my perspective, also coming from the diaspora, the sector where I see the most of well, Africa's capacity for innovation and climate-driven solutions significantly underestimated. We have seen research that only 3.8% of the global funding for climate research specifically targets solutions that are relevant for the African continent. Although every scientific research now shows that Africa as a continent is most affected by the climate change. And it gets even more interesting because out of this 3.8%, which I mentioned, only 14% of this research happens on the continent, which means that no one trusts the African continent to create innovative solutions, not only for the climate crisis, but also for our own challenges, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to address at the work we do at Readiness for Africa. Number one, we're trying to create trust, right? Because I mentioned the 3.8%. We don't believe that Africa can be innovative and create these solutions. So we're trying to create trust from the African diaspora, working closely with the young people on the ground. We know the challenges they face. We've experienced these challenges, most of us, so it's easier for us to work with them and build the trust. Number two, we're giving them funding. We're trying to increase the amount of funding that flows to the continent for the creation of innovative solutions by Africans, by African researchers, by African institutions. And number three, which is also very, very important, is the visibility. We can't create innovative African solutions and not give them as much visibility as they deserve. Because if we do so, we're not going to be able to change the narrative. We're talking about narratives today and really showing the world that the continent can be the creator of these innovative solutions. We have the youth, we have the ideas, we have the resources. So these are the three things that we are doing at Readiness for Africa.
Thank you very much, Continue. So I will hand over to Izzy Obeng, who, side notes, when Mafrida told me, oh my God, I'm so excited, we got Izzy on the panel, she mentioned she received an award by, I don't know, the King or the Queen of the UK. But let me remind you that we all come from kingdoms and queendoms, and we just need to remind ourselves. And no, this is not just a lofty comment. Christopher Manefo, who will join me in later, might tell you more about our kingdoms and queendoms in the networking session. Chris, I hope you heard me. Izzy, from your entrepreneur and investor interface, what do you perceive as structural challenges? Which ones remain real? And where do you see founders already outperforming the assumptions placed on them?
Yes. So just to get an idea of who's in the room, so I know that I'm preaching to the choir sometimes when I talk about the challenges that founders face. Can I have a show of hands for how many founders we have in the room? You're running your own businesses at the moment. Okay, so when I talk about the challenges faced, many of you will be in the trenches right now in terms of raising funding, in terms of accessing partners. A lot of the work that we do at Foundvine is around how we can build that bridge between founders who are on the ground doing fantastic work and the investor community and also the well-meaning but often not necessarily the kind of like most obvious partner is government and also private sector institutions for founders. So what we found is that when it comes to starting up, the challenges are universal. It is challenging running a business, you know. But if you are a founder from an underserved background, if you are a female founder, if you're a founder from a background where you have less social capital, the challenges can be vast and they often compound. And so organizations like ours, we exist to help make that process easier by bringing capital closer to you, by bringing opportunity closer to you, bringing talent closer to you and the tools that you need to grow your business. We started in 2018 at a time where there was a lot of focus on the challenges that women in particular faced when it comes to starting a business. Many of you have seen the stats, only 2% of venture capital funding going to all female founder teams. That means for, I was going to say franc, but for every pound, because that's my context, every pound of venture capital spending only 2 pence in the pound was going to an all-female founded team at that time. I think it was about 11 pence going to a mixed gender team and 89 pence in the pound going to all male teams. That's unacceptable, right? I think we can all agree that if half the population is not getting the funding that they need to innovate and build the businesses that we need for tomorrow, then we've got a real problem as a society. What we found in that period from then till now is that the stats have actually gotten worse, even though we've actually done more investing. Many of us would have been on panels and watched panels talking about investing in women. Funding has actually gone down globally since that time. The stats for black founders have also been really stark. So research showed that in 2009, only 38 black founders in the UK received venture capital funding, the entire population. And that was a 10-year period. Since then, the stats have also not changed. The reason I say this is because there's a lot of talk that goes into how we increase access to investment, how we make sure that founders from less advantaged background get opportunities. But the challenge we have is systemic. We are still seeing a venture capital community that has a lot of perception of risk, of women-led businesses, of diverse-led businesses, partly because it's easier to assess what you already know. And there's a lot of pattern matching, there's a lot of affinity biases that we need to address at a more systemic level. So what I'm seeing is founders who are building very capital efficient businesses, who are actually deciding that they are going to not take venture funding. They're going to take smaller amounts of angel funding and actually run just really, really efficient businesses. They're going to do a lot more through partnerships, through kind of working in interesting ways, collaboratively with other organizations, and they are still outpacing their peers when it comes to revenue. They are still outpacing their peers when it comes to performance. And so there's a gap that we see, particularly on the continent. So we spend a lot of time in Ghana, where these businesses are doing incredibly well, but they are not visible to investors, you know. They are not visible to the partners that they need to grow. And so a big part of our work at the moment is actually making sure we're increasing that visibility, we're increasing that access, and actually challenging some of the systems that say that African businesses cannot actually compete internationally and also can't be invested in without an excessive amount of due diligence on them before they are often given lower amounts of funding than their peers in the Western markets.
Thank you very much, Izzy. Thank you for providing me with the perfect segue. You mentioned due diligence, and oftentimes our perceived risks come from regulators, come from governance frameworks that are so complex and very penalizing. So, Scarlett, you have a special mandate at the Basel Institute on Governance, and I ask all of you to take the opportunity to talk to Scarlett and ask her how her mandate came about, because I believe what Siemens created is a blueprint for what many other countries and organizations should follow when something goes wrong in corruption cases. Corruption, one of those perceived risks. But yeah, from your governance and compliance standpoint, where is integrity most often misunderstood and an obstacle? And where have you witnessed collective action frameworks actually enable confidence engagement?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I have to say, I always love being the last speaker in the round because I get to build on all of the incredible statements already made by my panelists. And I just want to kind of capture two things that were thrown out here. One word that has come up again and again, even before we started the panel, and that's trust. So I've heard that a couple of times, and also maybe a little bit illicit financial flows, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And I know when you hear the term governance and compliance, it's not as sexy as investment and funding and all, but I want to kind of take this opportunity to kind of reframe, as we were saying, the narrative around that a little bit, because that's exactly what's happening in the discussion. The last 20 years, because there's been such a pressure on companies, whether it's FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or general increased in law enforcement in this space, there's been this pressure on developing systems. So that's why we're talking about governance systems. We're talking about compliance systems, so that you can check the box and you can demonstrate we've done it, don't come for us. That doesn't mean that you're implementing, what you have necessarily in the systems. So I think what's really interesting at this current time is with less potential FCPA, we don't know what's happening in that space anymore. Companies are asking themselves, what are we standing for? Why are we doing this? Do we still want to continue to invest this? And if so, why? And so we hear more and more this term being moved from just looking at governance and compliance to this what people call trust economy. And this concept of, okay, well, we're looking towards building trust. How do we do that? And so I would always say, if we're taking it from a financial, because I know there's people here in the room, that's more their space, compliance and governance systems is like the Visa payment system, and trust is the currency. So you need both in order for that to function, but the system alone isn't going to do it. And I think it's really interesting to hear that the data is already in. When we're looking at companies that have a high levels of trust, and typically the way that is measured is both from an employee perspective, so how's the trust from the employees working in the company, how is the trust from investors' perspectives, customers' perspectives, and companies that have a high level of trust in the institution are outperforming their peers, and there's a range here, as always, between 7 to 20%. So we know that trust is an important currency. Now the question is, how do you build it? And I think it's also an important one because unfortunately it's not something you can buy. You actually have to build it. And this is why we are always kind of pushing and working towards more collaborative approaches. And we heard it here too. Like in an environment where there's a lot of pressure from a competition standpoint, we want to make sure that business integrity is a plus when it comes to competition and not just a costing point. So I think that's where collaboratively coming together and developing common approaches. And I just want to, because I don't want to take too much time, but just add sort of one example where there's really that overlap of business interests. We're always looking at incentives. How does this benefit the bottom line, as well as reducing corruption risk, as well as strengthening business integrity? And one example is we worked on a couple of projects, actually in Ghana with the Ghanaian Revenue Authority, where there's a big issue with informal economy, lack of revenue coming in, and so a big push both from a government perspective of saying how do we get the businesses into the more formal economy, and at the same time, of course, for small businesses, you can't really grow when you're in an informal economy. There's a cap. So we were working both with informal businesses, formal businesses, as well as the government to kind of see what are standards that would be needed, like the minimum standards, discussed it so it's not too burdensome for companies. That wasn't implemented, and all companies that went through this got a tax deduction. So there was actually a real incentive to do it, and when they looked at the bottom line, even though they were deducting tax, the increase in revenue was still so much that it was, definitely a win-win situation. So I think those are kind of like the kind of examples we're looking for. Where can, both sides win? And often you hear it from a government's perspective, and that's where we also come in, where they're saying like, well, they have to. Legally, everyone's required to pay taxes. And I'm like, yeah, but if you look at your economy, 70% is informal, so how can we, get going on this while also building sort of like the right governance structures for those companies to then build and develop, and also able to connect into the global supply chains at some point.
Thank you very much, Scarlett. So in terms of the factors that determine those frameworks, I would like to hear from all of you, and we have 6 more minutes, and actually another question planned, but I would like to hear from all of you, looking across political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors, where do you feel the conversation should shift from caution to confidence?
Ladies and gentlemen, I will be very genuine and transparent with you. You see, Africa is the richest continent in the world. Africa is the breadbasket of the world. Africa has the minerals for the energy transition. Nevertheless, Africa imports its food. Africa imports refined oil and energy, Africa is exporting low value of goods and services and importing high value of goods and services. And what we are doing in the African Union Commission is we are negotiating day and night very hardly with all the multilateral financial institutions, with the World Trade Organization. The African Union now is a member of the G20, and we are advocating for a new international economic order where there is fair play between Africa and the world. If we do not address these chronic issues when these multilateral framework agreements were made even before the independence of many African countries, with my full respect to everyone, we cannot achieve what we want in Africa. Therefore, in the G20, we are negotiating. There's an African common position on debt that I want you all to read, and it is on the reform of the global financial architecture. In the WTO, we are negotiating for the reform of the agricultural subsidies agreement, because it is depriving Africa from exporting agricultural products and agricultural processing. We are negotiating the TRIPS agreement in the multilateral trading system, the World Trade Organization, because there is no technology transfer. When we come and negotiate with the private sector, they say that this technology is protected by patents. And without technology transfer, it would be difficult to add value and strengthen the manufacturing base in Africa. And this is why, my brothers and sisters, you in the private sector, investors, you have to work hand in hand with your governments, with the African Union Commissions, to advocate for technology transfer, technology diffusion, and know-how into the African continent. Then we will start seeing positive results. We'll start seeing exports. We'll start seeing integration. And just look at, I'll mention 3 sectors before I finalize my remarks. First, Africa is the largest producer of cacao in the world. Cacao is used as a main ingredient in the production of chocolate. When the prices of chocolate increased, last year, the cacao in the West Africa did not increase. And this shows you that there is no value chain, there is no value addition in Africa. And this has to be addressed. We have to add value to our products, and without the technology transfer, we will not be able to do that. Without access to capital, we will not be able to do that. Africa still lends. Africa, it's very expensive. Access to capital is very expensive because of the common framework of the G20 and because of the high interest due to the wrong formulas used. Because Africa's reform rates are low, but at the same time it is very expensive for African countries to borrow. And therefore this is why we're advocating for the reform of the global financial architecture. If you look into the wood, we went to Japan and we found that the DRC and Congo export wood to Japan as raw material, and they use this wood to build houses in Japan. And at the same time, Congo and DRC import cement from Japan to build houses. So why must we not know the knowledge and share knowledge between countries, and we can transform these value chains and strengthen them within Africa? But we're always choosing to export and then import finished products. We can use and catalyze the African Continental Free Trade Area to really to strengthen our value chains and add value to our production within Africa. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to make it short. Thank you very much, Tariq. So, last year I went back home in my village and I spoke with one of the farmers. I come from a small village in the western part of Cameroon called Foto. And he told me, when you were a small baby, we would plant, we would go to the field and plant the crops. We know exactly when the rain comes, know exactly when the rain goes, and everything was fine. We would produce a lot of food. But now, sometimes the rain comes, sometimes it doesn't come. And when it comes so much that it actually drowns all the crops. And I think that to your question, Talula, one thing that is really missing is we need to understand how much of an impact the climate crisis is going to have on the entire ecosystem. No matter in whatever scope that we're looking at everything, because agriculture employs more than 60-70% of the African continent. and agriculture is going to be the sector that is most affected by the adverse effects of climate change. So I think we need to bring that much more at the front of our mind. And when we're doing the investments and building the businesses and everything, always have in mind how can we mitigate or how can we ensure that we can fight climate change or kind of like even adapt to the adverse effects of climate change, because it's already present here today. So that's all I would say for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just very briefly, I'll say that I think sometimes we don't know what we can do as individual businesses in the private sector when it comes to a challenge as large as the one our panelists have described. But all of us have a role to play, and a huge part of our work at Foundavine has been connecting small businesses to talent in Africa. If you are looking for talent, amazing talent, please do come and speak to me. If you are a government institution and you are trying to find ways to reach incredible, innovative businesses who can build innovative solutions, please do talk to me. And if you are a small business yourself and you are looking for support and feeling disillusioned at not getting access that you need, either operationally or in terms of investment, please do speak to me. I think that we only grow by working collaboratively as organizations and building that value together. Thank you.
I'll round it up really, really quick on my end as well. I think building a little bit on what has already been said and what Izzy also mentioned is that learning from the people around you, but also I will say learn from the other side. So, for example, from my space, we're learning from, for example, the extremely efficient and successful corrupt networks. I mean, if you look around the world, this is how the illicit financial flows works. They're extremely well connected. There's reciprocity, there's incentives, structures all around the world. And in a way, we kind of need to look at that and say, how can we take that and actually apply it in a positive way, to actually be able to fight them and, to kind of outperform them in that way. So I would say, like, connecting that and creating that trust, because the trust will then, benefit you not just in terms of your individual business, but also in terms of, as you were saying, whether it's finding partners, whether it's finding finances, that can be scaled. And I think that's the most important thing to invest in, both inside the company and also within the sector and the community.
Thank you very much. So to round this conversation up, and Mafrida already gave me a game over sign, so I want to keep it brief. I look around the room and I asked you earlier, what brought you here today? And I don't want to make assumptions, but I don't believe that everyone in this room was born in Africa. But to paraphrase the great Kwame Nkrumah again, we're not Africans because we were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in all of us. So thank you very much for your time and patience.